Back again for another edition of Johnny W. Bird TV. Got a question for you. I guess it doesn't take a rocket scientist to realize that in our society there's a heck of a lot of information. Information everywhere you go. I mean, if you want to learn about something, there's information out there for it, whether it be Google or books, magazines, college classes. You can learn a lot about different things. And we value information. Certainly, we know there's a lot of people out there who covet master's degrees, PhDs, all kinds of things to improve their information. And I guess we think information makes us smart or wise. The question is it really? And perhaps we value information too much. And what we really should be looking for is ways to improve our observation. In fact, Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book called Blink. And one of the premises of the book was that sometimes decisions made on a lot of information can actually be worse than decisions made on lesser information. That sure runs counterintuitive, doesn't it? I mean, you would think if you're going to make a decision based on something important, you would want as many facts, as much data as you possibly could have before making the decision. Unfortunately, a lot of times it just doesn't work out that way, and sometimes you get bogged down in the details, and that can be bad, right? Think about it. You're making a decision, you have to make a quick one. Sometimes if you have the right information, it's going to help you to make a quicker decision, is it not? Sometimes it's not having a lot of information, it's having the right information. And you get the right information by knowing how to ask the right questions, and most of all, learning how to observe different things. I'm going to give you an example from the book Gladwell wrote about in Blink that was very, very telling. He wrote about somebody who decided to observe couples who were in marriage relationships. And he actually had data on people who were in marital relationships by observing them in I think 5 to 10 minute interviews. And by watching them, he was able to find out who was going to be divorced in the future at a pretty high percentage. And after he had created this system, so to speak, of determining that, he brought in other people to watch these tapes, people who were like the Dr. Phil types, the people who had all kinds of educational degrees in observing warning signs or red flags in marriages to determine if you think these people might have trouble in the future or might ultimately get divorced. And generally, after they saw these tapes, it was like a flip of the coin. The guys guessed pretty much 50-50 who was going to get married or who divorced. So even with all the information they knew and what they knew about couples, they really couldn't tell from a brief interview who was potentially going to get divorced. However, this guy who knew what to look for, he was about 90% effective. And what he would do was he observed eye movements, and he created a system where he could tell different facial expressions people made during questions, or how they responded to their spouse. And different facial expressions he determined were red flags of how you could determine a troublesome area in a potential marriage or a couple, what they were going through that somebody might not know about unless they knew what to look for. One couple who was young in their marriage and seemed really, really cute and happy were having this dispute about getting a dog, and the wife thought the husband was being silly. Dogs are wonderful, she thought. And she finally asked him why he didn't want a dog, and he just said, well, dogs are messy. Dogs are dirty. And she looked at him and she kind of like rolled her eyes. What do you mean dogs are dirty? Like she almost dismissed him on that count, that dogs could be dirty. Like, you don't know what you're talking about, or I know better than you. And this was what he described as a look of contempt. I guess when she did it, it was subtle, and maybe people couldn't pick up on it. But in a lot of ways, she didn't value her husband. She thought, he just doesn't know. It was kind of an elitist mentality that I know dogs are good, and you don't know dogs are good. So how dare you not want a dog? You know, dog's the best thing for our house. We should have a dog. Dogs are lovable. And eventually, I guess this guy went along with getting a dog to keep his wife happy. But this was a very serious red flag for the long-term health of the relationship. And this was just one thing, one little thing you could pick up that could just tell you in marriage counseling, you know, this could be a potential bad mate for you to marry. And it doesn't take a lot of books to read that. It doesn't take a lot of PhDs to say that. It was just the right thing to observe. And I think that's something very important to look at in what we value as being important in our decision making. It's not so much the information we have, but it's the observational techniques we use with people. And start observing people. See when your observations are accurate and keeping a mental note of those. And see if they make a difference. Because all the book knowledge you have, all the head knowledge you have, sometimes just doesn't cut it, and sometimes it just gets you bogged down in the details. And that's not helpful at all. Out.